I normally do the introduction with my guest listening at the start of each episode, and it's used to kickstart the conversation. I didn't do it with Fuzieh Jallow this time, and I'm really pleased that I didn't because I hadn't quite realized just what she's achieved in a short space of time with her business. She went to the first conference on transitioning away from fossil fuels in Colombia a couple of months ago, a conference I wish I was at. And while she was there, she brought together 57 Afro-descended organizations to convene and decide a facilitation process that she designed and run. And this led to choosing 11 delegate representatives from 7 countries. And so we're circling around probably the subject that's the nearest and dearest to my heart in all my work, which is that of climate justice. And I'm very pleased that we finally got an episode so resolutely focused on, I think, the most important topic of the lot. What sings through for me is her passion and also her dedication to that tightrope walking act of diplomacy between different nations. I certainly had an inspiring time during this conversation, and I hope you do too. Hello, Fuzieh. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So we always start off with a little bit of identification, and we're speaking to a whole broad range of people within the climate and nature sector. So do you identify as an activist or a campaigner or an advocate or an environmentalist or something else?
Um, None of those things. And I want to make sure I answer this carefully because I respect all the people who claim those identities. So the organizations I work with are often led by activists, advocates, and people from the communities most directly affected by decisions made at large global forums. But the work I do is essential, and I have great admiration for all of them. But my role is different. I'm a strategic architect. My job is to make sure that the people doing the advocacy arrive in these spaces prepared, positioned, and culturally fluent enough actually to be heard and cut across all the noise. So having a powerful message that is not, it's not the same as having a strategy to make it land. So my clients have the message, I provide the strategy.
Architects, that's really cool. Is
Mhm.
that like a common parlance, or is that something that you've created, that term?
I mean, I'm pretty sure I pulled it from somewhere. I never claimed that anything came from my head because, you just move through life and you hear all these great things. So who knows where I really got it from, but it stuck with me as an identifier. So yeah.
I like it. It sort of chimes in with the idea of movement building. I think
Yeah.
I'm always a big believer that we're here to build and create rather than destroy and extract.
Agreed.
Um, so I don't know how much you've been following the podcast, but we're working with this amazing academic called Chris Mayer, who is in University College London, and we're very keen on following the climate communication science. And he's proven conclusively that it's stories of action that inspire action. So what we like to do is we like to drill down into your communications career and
Hmm.
find like your tale of action that might inspire your peers, maybe in different sectors.
Okay.
So, is there a case study? Is there a tale of action that you'd like to focus on?
Yes, there is. Quite recently, April 2026, Santa Marta, Colombia. So I will talk a little about that. The governments of Colombia and the Netherlands recently just co-hosted the first international conference on transition away from fossil fuels. So it's the first government-hosted international conference specifically focused on moving away from fossil fuels. So civil society, governments, academics, and frontline communities came across from all around the world to attend this. And what made it architecturally distinct from most international climate processes was its approach to participation. So Afro-descended communities were included as a distinct stakeholder sector in the formal process, something that has not yet happened within the UNFCCC's own architecture. And I do hope more forums follow this model. My clients brought me in to co-steward the global Afro-descended sector and delegation, and I want to be precise. My role was to build the infrastructure that allowed the delegation to do their work. So the politics, the platform, the voice, those belonged entirely to them. So 57 Afro-descended organizations registered for this conference. So through a collective facilitation process I helped design and run, they arrived at 11 delegate representatives from 7 countries. Um, And so the policy stakes, I would say, were pretty clear. I mean, this conference would directly inform the UNFCCC's SB 64 technical negotiations in Bonn next month, the intersessional process that feeds directly into COP31. And what got said in that room and what made it into the formal record would travel forward. So this is not a side event, it was the main event. And the representational stakes were quite significant. So with Afro-descended communities, they're one of the most affected by the fossil fuel economy. And it's through extraction, displacement, and climate vulnerability. And yet their voices have been systematically excluded from the formal spaces where decisions about their futures are made. So this conference was a structural opportunity to bring to begin changing that. And so I would say the question really is, so how do you actually move 57 organizations across 7+ countries to a unified voice? And so the approach I took there was 3 layers. First is the pre-forum work. So before anyone got on a plane, these 57 organizations need to be oriented toward a shared mission. So, I mean, that meant weekly coordination and strategy calls conducted bilingually across English and Spanish, and a series of pre-departure virtual dialogues that I co-facilitated. So this is not a ministry tax. This is like the foundation of everything where else stood. The second is the message architecture. We were helping those organizations build a unified policy platform. And I want to be also precise that I didn't author that platform, the delegation did. So my job was to create the conditions for the collective intelligence of that group to arrive at something coherent without flattening the genuine diversity of perspectives. And then that's one of the hardest work there is, in my opinion. And then third was the on-the-ground execution. So I served as the coordination lead and the Ministry of Environment for Colombia's liaison. And the Assembly of the People was the formal mechanism through which civil society input reached governments at this conference. So getting the delegation into that channel at the right moment, in the right format, it required understanding not just the mechanism, but the relationships inside it. Um, yeah, so I'll pause if you have questions there, but that's kind of the setup there. There were some challenges, I have to say, but I can share some of them now.
No, I've got more questions. So many questions. Okay, so um, specifically, was it you that came up with that strategy then, that three-pronged strategy, firstly?
Yes, it was. It's typically something I've done in my past work. So it works in coalition building specifically. If you're working with just one organization, it may not work. You have to customize it for their needs. But for this one, because of so many people, I definitely had to do a layer so everyone could follow along in the process and feel included through every moment of it.
Yeah, so that's feeding included, isn't it? And you've already highlighted that that was really hard. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm really interested to find out a bit more around this creation of conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Again, with the idea that our audience is going to learn from you and hopefully replicate that in their sector.
Yeah.
So what's the process? Like, how do you go about creating those conditions? And indeed, firstly, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by the creation of conditions?
Well, okay, let me give you some context, right? So one of the first challenges when entering the process is for the Afro-descended organization that were participating initially had strong roots in North America, right? And so we're building a delegation. It's meant to represent communities from across basically around 4 regions: Latin America, Caribbean, North America, and Europe. And the preparation process was not fully reflecting that breadth. So I had to stop, name that and what I was seeing, and restructure how we were running the process. So who was being centered in the calls, how the platform was being developed, whose perspectives were informing the strategy. So that really meant slowing down and going back before we could move forward. So it required building new relationships across organizations that were coming into this work from very different contexts, right? If you're coming from Cancer Alley, around the New Orleans area, coming from Colombia, or coming from, let's say, Nigeria as well, I mean, how you see energy transition it really is different. It's not the same. And so the platform that emerged from it had the legitimacy precisely because every region had generally shaped it. So really, just kind of flipping the script and checking my own biases. As I live in North America, right, and how we do things and how we gather coalition and cohesive support is it can be a little bit different. So just really taking input from others as well and helping ensuring that it's really truly authentically integrated so everyone felt there it was a comfortable space for them. So yes, having translators and interpreters is great and so forth, but also just how people communicate and reflecting that, not necessarily in every single meeting, but in spaces where people can really just kind of lean into their form of expression to share their expertise is how I kind of put that system together.
So what's the specific? I mean, I'm literally interested in like the specific technicalities of how you receive that feedback.
Hmm.
So for example, did you have like forms to fill out? Did you have shared Google Docs? Did you like work out in advance like a sort of a rules for ways to speaking that would accommodate
Hmm.
everybody's perspective? Like, tell me a bit more about the
Yeah.
technical side of your work, the how.
Yeah. No, honestly, you're naming almost pretty much all of it. So yes, I I mean I don't know how people want to go into the weeds of it, but that's really what it is. Like putting together a survey. I mean, I love my surveys. I tend to use them post event and so forth together. But really here it's just meeting with the clients, just addressing like, okay, these are the organizations that's showing up in this space. Let's put together a small quarter group so they have a space to like help form the overall strategy. So it's not just like the two clients I'm supporting, but opening up the space a bit. So we are also really helping sure that we create something that's effective. But the best people who know what's going to land with them are the ones coming from those organizations and those communities. So really opening that the leadership cord, if you will, to kind of step in and also support us there. The Google Docs, I mean, I'm a huge fan. I've done that with all of my events and particularly with this one as well, sharing those documents, having a process where every communication was quickly and well translated into Spanish because we had a lot of Spanish speakers participating in this process. And then also just taking moments to stop and like reassess and just asking for feedback in the middle of the process and not waiting at the beginning or the end where some people technically do that, but just creating those moments. So let's stop. How's this working out? What do we need to change? Is the meetings too long? Do we need to be discussing other areas of work and strategy? Do we break out into smaller groups? And then someone can come back and all convene and share that out with the larger group because there's so many of us. So really just taking those moments every couple of weeks or so and just assessing, is this working? Is this effective? Because sometimes when there's that deadline, which is really the attendance at the event, you're just going, going, going. And so for me, it's just being intentional about let's create these moments where we're really ensuring that we're on the right path for everyone. And so we can go together along on that journey.
So there was like a summary call once every 2 weeks in order to make sure that everybody is up to speed. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I've been there myself, right? Herding cats, etc. So you got 57 stakeholders plus
Yeah.
two clients on top, so 59 people. So how was the engagement, and how did you keep them engaged?
Listen, I'll be honest, sometimes 59 people didn't show up. Some people it was a lot
Okay.
less, right? I mean, that's the reality of it. I mean, when especially if you're in an organization participating in the conferences, that's not necessarily your main priority, right? You've got other things to run your organization. And so these forums is can be seen as a luxury, can be seen as something necessarily depend on where you are with your organization, but you don't get that full participation every single week. So just creating systems where, okay, you missed this week and the next week because you've had other things going on within your organization. But how do we package the summary, get the recording out so everyone feels like, okay, they can still catch up and still be part of the process. They're not completely out when we're going through it. So I feel like those are the things that it feels tedious, but it's helpful. And I just feel like being flexible with that. Things happen. There's other priorities at play. This is like one milestone amongst many others. So I think leading with that kind of flexibility and incorporating that that's been super helpful for everyone involved. So yes, sometimes 59 are engaged, and sometimes it feels like more like 20. and more like 20 for 2 weeks. So, and that's fine, but just also just creating the space for them to feel like there's a way to get back into the fold and keep it moving and still stay engaged. So a part of that's also my flexibility because I do have a type of personality where let's go, what's next, what's move. But then also just in stepping back and understanding people's context that are typically outside from what I've experienced in the workplace.
And you hinted earlier on about like challenges. So was this the main challenge, or what other challenges were you facing?
I so that was, I mean, the main challenge. That was the main challenge. I think that I'm ashamed to say it a little bit, but also the bilingual environment, not really understanding how, when you're translating between languages, these official documents we have to turn into high level segment, the weight and the meaning, the cultural renaissance can change if you don't get it right. So like how we say things in colloquial American English can land differently for someone else, or it doesn't translate
Mm.
with the same weight that you want it to. So really taking the time to work with people to really get it right. So just as the way it comes off so strongly and effective for English speakers, you want to make sure it does the same for Spanish speakers or for French speakers also for this context. So I think that was a bit of a challenge that I didn't really anticipate, but we got it right at the end because everyone was comfortable we were turning in. But it's that misunderstanding that can happen with that and just making sure like how we mean and how it's felt and the power and the emotion behind it, it's still resonant. May sound different, but it's still resonant across another language.
I mean, when I go to the United Nations conferences, I love it so much. I love the fact that I can pivot 360 degrees, and I know that I'm looking at people from 100 different countries,
Yeah.
and it's truly wonderful. And my main observation is that it basically forces everybody to be super polite with each other. So everybody defaults to this ultra polite version of interacting just because everyone's very culturally sensitive
Yeah.
around everybody else. And I think it's a great, it's a great way of being that I wish could be replicated away from like the rarefied atmosphere of a United Nations conference.
Yeah.
And so was it appreciated, like these efforts that you were making to try and bring everybody together, this cross cultural collaboration? Did you get a sense that your stakeholders were appreciating and grateful for the effort that you were taking?
No, I absolutely. I mean, I always ask like my clients or anyone I'm working with, like just don't give me the feedback at the end. That's not going to help anything. Like give me the
Yeah.
feedback now, and I just feel like so we can always fix and course correct throughout the process. And I feel very comfortable saying that they were very happy with the work, and even the group itself. Although I truthfully I'll be having my debrief with the entire group later on today. But before that, they did felt like that they can see the changes being made and implemented when they raised things, and then the following week it was implemented effectively. So I do think that they're very happy with that. It is tricky work. I mean, cultural intelligence is extremely important. It's not an afterthought. It's not like a special decoration. You need to be able to understand how to communicate effectively. I would like to say lovingly a rowdy bunch. We talk about the formalities of the UN spaces. Um, this group was just very comfortable, just showing up as they are, and kind of threw that to the wind, which was fun and unexpected. And I'm always trying to like keep the herd together. Let's keep going. Let's move in this direction. But I do respect the fact that people just showed up as who they are, and so that is nice. I like that as well. Like as much as I like
Yeah,
the
that's
UN
so
formalities,
cool.
I also like the people just like this is how we are. This is, and it's different. But you respect that like, this they're showing up fully as themselves.
And who exactly were they? Like, what sort of job roles are we looking at here?
I mean, these are folks who are executive directors of organizations, grassroots, social movements, other NGOs coming from Colombia, Ecuador, Dominican Republic, obviously the United States, Canada. So really from all over, from the civil society, NGO, social movement space, and great leaders in their own right. And also coming from spaces, I would say, that are quite challenging and just have different impacts that they're experiencing from energy transition processes. So I don't know. I just everyone had an amazing story, and there's so many of them. So it was just it's really glad to be outside the North American bubble sometimes that you can fall into if you do work in the climate space in the U.S. for so long.
So when you were running those, bi-monthly meetings where fingers crossed 59 people showed up, like
No,
how did you
weekly meetings.
was it weekly? Oh,
Yeah, it
I
was
thought it was
weekly.
okay.
Yeah.
So how did you structure it? So it was so firstly, what platform were you using? Were you using Zoom or Google Meet or
No, I was using Zoom. I've had the best luck with Zoom. No shade to Google, but Zoom was a lot more effective. And also because we always had interpreters, I just found that system a lot more easier to able to invite interpreters in, and then folks can be in special rooms to hear the conversation that way.
wow? So you've got live translation going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. So did you do things like allow a space for everybody to introduce themselves in the chat, or I mean, all the sort of formalities around the meeting structure? I'm really interested. How did that all work?
Because it's such a large group, I always prefer to do those introductions in chat. We have 60 minutes once a week. So I
Mm.
really want to make good use of our time. Obviously, there are other opportunities to get to know each other more deeply, but we did those introductions in the chat. And then typically always started off with the framing, a recap of what has been done, what has been accomplished, and kind of looking back a little bit. And then what are the key goals that we want to be able to move in this meeting and get everyone up to speed. So that framing always happened at the beginning. And the way I had designed the process, just because we want to make sure everyone's engaging, but also engaging in the areas of the work that they're most interested in. So we had three subcommittees that had separate meetings throughout the week. And that was one around policy. That was one around events and programming because we were planning on hosting events on the ground. And then third was communications and marketing. And so so typically those weekly meetings were split up to give updates and next steps for those particular work areas. And groups were split up based on those three that they chose and were meeting at their own time during the week. So it was the opportunity to kind of share with the collective what was discussed, what's happening, and so forth, and to kind of move forward from there.
Very good, very good. Well, many congratulations. But it's still not finished, isn't it? Because Colombia's only just finished. So I suppose you're now, washing up with your team. And is there anything else, any like tactics that you could share for someone else who's entering an analogous process that you think might be useful about overcoming the challenges you're facing around this complex, coordination of all these people from different regions and so on?
Honestly, for me, what made this process even better was establishing a direct communication channel with the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development Colombia. They're incredibly supportive, helpful partners. I mean, they're one of the hosts for this conference, but I think that just able to build that communication channel and strengthen it, and also working as a team with them. Obviously, we want them to be successful in hosting this conference, but we also want to make sure that these sector and these delegates that I'm representing are also successful. So understanding this whole new process that they're creating, and don't know if it's fair to say in real time, but really this conference was announced at the end of COP last year in Belém. And then here we are having this host. So I would say it's pretty rapid to put together a conference at this scale. So they had a lot on their plate, but maintaining that communication, even through the dialogue, the virtual dialogues that we co-facilitated on their behalf, and just understanding what their needs are. They really honed in that we really need to have solutions presented. What are the solutions? So
Hmm.
taking their needs and incorporate in terms of how we're structuring and kind of working with these different organizations. So they are really effective in that space. So I think that for me, and I don't know if that was the experience for other sectors, but for me, working with the Afro-descendants and the ministry environment, that was a seamless process because everyone had the same interest in making sure that this was successful on all fronts and building that communication channel, meeting with them regularly, and really understanding what is this that from your perspective is going to make this successful, and here's what we need to make this successful for them, and then coming together and finding that middle ground. So I was very happy working with the ministry, Colombian ministry specifically on that because that was my direct interface.
So I want to return to this and talk a bit more about how you see the project developing in the future and impact or so on. But I want to take a break now because we always have our quick fire round. And for those new to the podcast, we basically ask the same questions every week of our guests. And we think the interest comes from the different responses. And indeed, we're just about to start releasing what we call mashups, like different people responding in different ways. It's turning out
Oh,
very well. So
that's
so you'll
awesome.
be part of future montages, uh, Fuzieh. But for now, let's just find out.
Okay.
So here we go. We start off with a bit of word association. What's the first word that comes to mind when I say climate?
Justice.
Very good. Who is your greatest inspiration, specifically in climate and nature comms?
Uh, Climate and nature comms. Well, I'm going to stick with Dr. Beverly Wright. So she was the founder of the first environmental justice center in the U.S., fighting environmental racism in Cancer Alley. And so, for those who don't know, Cancer Alley is this 85-mile stretch between the Mississippi River, between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, and that's where over 200 petrochemical plants sit alongside predominantly Black communities. So her community model lives with community experience and academic research on general equal footing. So her communication style has always been able to be persuasive to both groups who typically have not been connected in sharing the expertise and bringing them together. So I would say that that bridge to able to speak to different audiences and bring them together, this field needs more of that.
So do you think her work receives enough attention?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that people know of her and she's well respected, but I'm always shocked if someone else doesn't know about her, and which is quite often. So I do
Hmm.
think that she should be known everywhere about this amazing work. And the fact that her organization really is the leading one for environmental justice in the US. And so I think that her organization is a model for how academia and communities can come together.
Do you have a favorite book or a movie or a TV show within our sector, environmentalism, climate, nature, sustainability?
Uh, it's an inconvenient truth. I know it's not like a sophisticated answer, but that film showed me what a single, well-designed communication moment can do, and I think it changed how millions of people understood a crisis. So it's the kind of impact I think that our field is capable of at its best.
Absolutely, it's a common answer, and I think it's attacked for by the forces of evil just because it has been so successful.
Mhm.
Leaving aside face to face, apart from that, what's your favorite communications channel?
Leaving aside face to face.
Oh yeah, sorry, I've put you on the spot there because most people say face to face. So again, like really drilling into like the technicality of your role. Like, is it e-marketing? Is it Zoom? Is it LinkedIn? Is it conference appearances? Like, what's your favorite
Uh,
communications channel?
Instagram stories. Truly, I really enjoy just taking my Instagram stories and just like catching the moment on the ground behind the scenes. I feel like people get the better sense of like what's really happening. And listen, and I'm guilty of it. I think we all are. LinkedIn, all those spaces are very, it's curated to a certain extent, right? In terms of what you want to get out there. But I've used Instagram stories, at least for Terra40, just like a peek behind the curtain kind of thing. So as much as you'll see all the Photoshops and the great blog writing and so forth to talk about the work, I want people to know like this is like what's happening behind it. This is the country that we're in. This is the beauty, the culture. This is the craziness. So I use Instagram stories to really kind of get people a deeper dive. So that really is, if truthfully, my favorite communication tool as of late.
And do you think it's the most effective, or is there another one that you want to highlight that's effective?
It's effective in that I could really dress it up to try to evoke the emotion I'm looking for, right? I can put the music in, I can change the filter, so I can play with it just to get across what I want you to feel in that moment. And it's easy. It's not. I'm not a tech savvy person. I can't. I don't know. I don't do a deep dive in the audience and who's looking, so I can just pull up my phone, take my Instagram story, play with it, and it's like this is my expression of what I want you to see.
Do you have a favorite stat or fact that defines the climate and nature crisis?
I do, and I tend to always go to this one. In 2024's People Climate Vote, 80% of people worldwide want more climate action, and 86% want countries to set aside geopolitical differences to work together. So that gap between public will and political action is what drives everything I do.
Oh my word, I posted about that. I was posting about that the weekend, actually. I think it's being used as an excuse, the whole myth that, like, well, people, when push comes to shove, they don't want change. Yes, they do, you know.
Yeah.
So here, here. Um, so that's one myth, but what's another climate myth, misconception, piece of misinformation that you just wish could be eradicated from the earth?
Um, I would say the sense that awareness equals action. I think people know about climate change. I mean, that to me is clear. What they need is the pathways to power, the pathways to power to make the change, to instill in their lives the way it sees fit for them. I think that's the thing that people really want.
And I would argue inspirational, relevant stories
Hmm.
so they can identify with the person who's the storyteller and they can follow them and take action. People like you, which is why this podcast exists. Um, what's your number one source of climate information?
Um, Typically, it's direct conversations with communities experiencing climate impacts. I don't think anything really replaces that. But I do enjoy being on LinkedIn also and going through the chats and engaging conversations that way as people respond to a post or share an article and just see what people are thinking there. And I also try my very best to make sure I'm not operating in a bubble with that information. Just really pushing the boundaries to what are others thinking that I typically wouldn't agree in around this issue. Um, there's this I don't know if you heard about this, Tom. It's called Ground Up app. I was recently told about like a month ago. So
Okay.
it takes some media from everywhere, like all these media sources, and it tells you the left, the right, the middle. So I've been kind of obsessed with that. That's like another additional thing. I know you said one, but that's another additional source because I'm really fascinated. Like, oh, so this is what they're thinking. That's how they read that and interpret that particular news. So that's yeah. So I'm getting around, but like that's another one I've been enjoying as of late.
I've seen that advertised on other
Yeah.
podcasts, actually, now I come to think of it. Final for the quick fire round. Do you have a go to analogy or metaphor for explaining the climate crisis?
Um, I've heard many great ones. I think the one I've of late have been using, I've used in a conversation, um, is a negotiating table set for decades. All the right issues are on the agenda, but the people with the most at stake are kept outside the room. Our work is getting them to the table and making sure that they're prepared when they sit down. So that's an analogy I've used recently.
Very good. Very good. Well, let's return back to your amazing work in Colombia. So it's only just finished, so we can't really identify like what impact it had yet. But what are your plans? I mean, how are you going to be measuring its impact in the coming days, weeks, months?
Well, listen, so the delegation engaged directly with Colombia's Ministry of Environment, and they deliver their input through the assembly for the people. And as I mentioned briefly before, it's the formal civil society mechanism at this conference. So it's not a peripheral conversation, it's the channel. So the policy platform that was submitted was specific, it was policy legible, and on the formal record of the global process. And that the delegation has stated that their intention is to carry it forward into Bonn next month and beyond as COP31. And for this particular group, as Afro-descendants, COP32 in Ethiopia is of significance to them. Um, and the coalition itself has a lasting infrastructure. So, I mean, 57 organizations have never worked together now before, but now they have all these relationships and a shared platform they've submitted. And so we're thinking up and working up ways to continue this larger coalition so they continue to move the needle on energy transition through the upcoming conferences throughout. So how do I measure,
Are you going to carry
his,
on your surveys? You said that you like surveys.
I do
Are there
like
more
surveys.
surveys in the way?
But here's what I'll say. So, and honestly, um, to measure impact at global forums, it's not necessarily so clean. And I think that's really important to say out loud. Okay. So the outcomes that matter most operate on timelines that outlast like any single engagement, right? And the metrics most organizations reach for is attendance, media hits, and
Mhm.
I think that's often the wrong frame for this kind of work. And so what I track is were the right voices in the right spaces at the right moments? Did the delegation's position reach the formal record? In this instance, yes. Did clients leave better positioned than when they arrived? And then, like, the leading indicator I trust most is like, do their attendees who participated in their events, did they continue to stay engaged? Which takes about 2, 3 months after the engagement's over to really track and have a post forum kind of campaign, if you will. So awareness is not enough. I mean, influence really is the goal. So the influence has a longer arc that most organizations are built to sit with. So that's how my best way I would say how I assess. And it does take a little more time, but I certainly have some good data right now.
And okay, great. So yeah, let's talk about that data. So how are you collecting it? Where are you storing it? How are you enriching it? Is it all within Google Sheets or surveys, or what's the software you're using?
Yes, part of it is like just creating my from a Google survey that I create and I share out as well. Also, it's just the all the transcribes and the note taking from these close to final meetings and gathering that information. Also, being on the ground at these events. I mean, I know we're doing multiple things between doing the social media and setting up and managing the event, but then there's also a couple of us tasked to just to engage the audience and able to, like, kind of, those mystery shoppers, if you will. We kind of employ that a little bit just to get a sense of how what you think about the event. Like, did you feel like the design of the programming and so forth kind of was to your liking? What speakers did you feel like should have been present and so forth? Like in the moment, asking these questions, engaging with people. So we do that, and that's how we kind of collect data as well. Also following up with each attendee after each event, right after, and just to keep them engaged and share additional material if they want to learn more. So this is the ways, the mechanisms that we create to kind of constantly keep pulling in data and information, which sometimes in real time can inform how we're setting up for the next event that day. Because we may want to change things and tweak things just because of what we saw that may not have been anticipated at the previous event as well.
So I'm going to hone in on that very key word for the last question before we go on to the final section of the podcast, which is learning. Is there anything? I mean, you're a very very experienced comms professional, but what did you learn that you didn't know going into this process 3, 4, 5 months ago that you could maybe like share with our audience that they could take that learning for their own projects that are similar?
I think the thing that I learned through this process is that um, this group, you have more partners than you realize. And I do want to go back to the ministry. I don't think that people really understood that if they had, since they were putting this together, they can give some more insight in terms of what was needed to be a lot more effective. And I think that just making that outreach and connection, which I didn't think that I could do, to be honest, because when you're working in an organization, the NGO nonprofit sector and the ministry and the governments, it feels like this higher upper thing. Like if you don't have access to it, you don't really know what they're doing, but they're putting this and you have to play by the rules. But there's like ways to connect and build relationships that can really help benefit everyone. So I didn't realize that's something that I could have access to, and that it could be a stronger benefit to the people that I am serving. So I feel like that's truly, I think that was a little bit different experience of any other kind of events that I was preparing for. I didn't really have too much government experience from that end, but this has been a really refreshing and great, and just really feel like, oh, okay, just I don't necessarily need to look within the bubble to find these allies. They're they're also in the government as well, and you just have to just reach out. And they were definitely had doors wide open. Like, how do we best support this group?
That is really, really encouraging to hear. And on a personal note, when I was looking at it from afar, I was just thinking, this is what COP could be. It's what COP could be, was my sense.
Yeah,
And I'm really hoping and excited that, the energy created can be taken into Bonn and then on to
I hope
Turkey later
so.
in the year. I'm certainly going to be working hard to try and do it. Okay, well, so let's go on to. So again, many congrats, and please like keep me updated. Let's go on
Thank
to your
you.
opinions more generally. What do you see as the future of our sector, specifically climate comms, climate and nature comms?
Okay. Um, I would say, well, we need to shift whose voices lead, right? And I mean that as a strategic statement, not just an equity one. I do think that the most effective climate solutions often come from the communities with the longest history of environmental adaptation. So, centering indigenous knowledge systems, community-based strategies, and local innovations told in the languages and cultural contexts where they originated. That is a
Yes,
better
yes.
story, full stop, right? And even in Santa Marta, I had a great opportunity to go visit an indigenous community called the Mamos, and just able to hear how they were speaking in their language about the issues and what it meant to steward the land. Like that was powerful for me. Yes, I had someone translating right there next to me, but to see them look eye to eye and hear their language, be in their setting, I mean that's storytelling at its best. That's the way I think it should be done. I do think that cultural intelligence is becoming a genuine professional competency requirement. I think the practitioners who invest in it will have a structural advantage, and those who treat it as optional will find themselves working in rooms that have long moved on. So I feel like that should be the future of communications. Yeah.
Very good. And the science, I mean, especially I've focused in on like the community aspects, the tales of action on the ground. That is the thing that works. And that's certainly something I want to do this year with our organization, with Climate Acceptance Studios, is that to stop giving so much voice to the sort of top down, the figures of
Hmm.
authority, but the people who are actually,
Yeah.
at the coalface, pun intended.
Yeah.
Um, interestingly, so I mean, do you yourself follow the science of climate communication? Do you follow those social scientists that are serving millions of people at once to sort of test messaging and so on? So, for example, the Potential Energy Coalition. Do you ever sort of, how much time do you devote to keeping up to tabs with all of that?
I mean, I keep up in a way, and I think that I apply it, and it's in my own way as I understand it to be. And I think I imply I listen. I think it's values based framing, right? Solutions oriented efficacy messaging. So that literature actively informs how I work. So I pay attention how I can better do that. I think that if we lead with community driven solutions and not like the catastrophic predictions. I think we all know that that doesn't work. Every engagement includes like clear pathways for action. So, but almost all that science is built on research about general public audiences. So, a formal civil society statement at an international plenary operates by completely different rules than a social media campaign. So, knowing which register you're in and being honest about what the science does and does not tell you in that register is a professional discipline this field needs more of.
What's the best bit of advice you've ever received about climate comms?
Know the room before you enter it. I know it's simple to say, but I think it's generally hard to do for some people. So understanding who is in the room, what they already believe, what their incentives are, what language they speak, literally and figuratively, is the foundation of every effective decision you'll make once you're in it. So a message that resonates in Geneva might be completely missed in Banjul or Bogota. So getting that right is extremely important.
If you were speaking to like this bright young thing who's just finished his or her degree and they basically want to end up being you in 20 years time, like what would be that one piece of advice that you would give them to guide their career in climate comms from the beginning?
I would say build relationships before you need them. I think
Very
that
good.
I think the access and trust that make you effective in this space are not built at these international convenings that you get to go to. They're built in like the months and years before it. In the follow through, the showing up when it's not convenient, the giving more than you take, and take yourself seriously. And I think in practice, that changes everything about how you show up and what doors open.
And how do they do that? I mean, how does this 22-year-old build relationships? Like, what are the tactics?
And listen, my personality, Tom, I really want to let people into spaces and develop relationships with people who have integrity and are really hardworking. And even if their style is a bit outside of what I would normally do, but be always staying open to that difference. And I think that as long as you're working and with people and trust people who also are committed to the work, I think those are the best type of relations I like to continue to invest in. Sometimes you hear, sometimes you see people developing attachments to others because it can open a certain door for them, but that's not authentic. That's not real. You want people who are really just as committed and just you genuinely like and enjoy, and you're developing a better version of yourself through your interaction with them. So I do think that you should vet properly, like you vet properly for anything in your life, vet people. And I think that where you're supposed to go, I am a believer in that. You'll eventually make your way there. So don't chase after access and people who can get you that access. Just chase after authenticity and things that you feel like you're becoming a better person. And I think that ultimately you'll be happy with who you see in the mirror later in life.
I can't agree more. I wish I'd known these rules when I was a bit younger.
I didn't know them either, Tom, but I'm course correcting every chance I get.
Exactly. You've got to play each moment very, very
Yeah,
well, and
yeah,
then let the journey that you're going to take care of itself. As long as
yeah,
you're playing each moment, each day, each meeting as well as you can.
yeah.
It's very hard to maintain it, but especially as you get older and a bit more creaky like I am. But there we go. Okay, so we've finished with two really big questions. One is, if you could single out one message that the public needs to hear right now, what would that one message be?
um, that energy transition is already happening, and who shapes it is still being decided. I think that the decisions being made at forums like the SB64 next month in Bonn will determine whether energy transition is equitable or extractive. Most people have no idea these decisions are happening, the day-to-day folks just living their lives, or if that there's still space to influence them. So I think closing the gap is the most important thing this field can do, and it's a solvable problem.
And finally, a thought experiment. I want to imagine that you're up on stage and you have an audience of every single climate communicator of the world, be they climate justice, be they anti-plastics, be they bureaucrats on trade policy, trying to weave in sustainability, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And if above all else, they could pick one communication strategy to be the most effective, one universal communication strategy that covers all these sectors, what would you advise that one strategy is?
Yeah, it's a hard one, Tom. So I'll do my very best. Um, Listen, I always kind of go back to the room, but as I get more of the right people in the formal spaces where decisions are actually made, and make sure that they arrive prepared. I mean, be your brother's keeper, if you will. Like I believe that, and I think then sometimes it's dying out that philosophy. So they're not just present and they're just not invited. They're not a token. They're generally prepared to shape what gets decided. I think the leverage in this field is not in the campaigns or the content. The I mean, those are important as they are. It is in the rooms, but I think that most of the people who should be in these rooms are not yet in them, and that remains the most important gap in this field.
And it goes back to those right people being in the room, the people that the audience can make an emotional connection with, can identify with,
Yeah,
in order to create chains of action that build towards solutions, I think.
yeah.
Well, look, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. As this is the podcast of busy climate communication professionals, I always end with, like, what's next on your to-do list? If you can reveal what's next on your calendar, what do you have coming up in the next couple of hours?
I have in an hour and a half, I have my final report back in debrief with the Afro-descended delegation sector from Santa Marta. I have event production strategy call for an event that I'm working with called Africa Rising Youth and Climate Justice. That'll take place next month on Environmental Day. I've got a kickoff strategy call for bond preparations also today, and a discovery call with a prospect client. So wish me well. That's my day
The
today.
best of luck. The best of luck. And yeah, I will definitely catch up with you in Bonn. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.